Well, you know, they feel like we could just say that's the end of the show here. But because I have such little trust in mainstream media now and can't imagine how they're going to try and spin this for you, I want to continue to the end of the show. There's only one last segment I really wanted to get into. And I think it's important because whether or not it comes to fruition or we stay in lockdown or not, we should know what we were being led into, what they were taking us. How many of your reporters were telling you you needed to make this sacrifice and destroy the economy of America? We can never forget that moment because Donald Trump, in his decision-making, and believe me, no one would want to have to sit in the middle of this data, which is now proving to be incredibly false data. No one would want to have to make the decision, but this is what he said helped him make that decision. What about the cure? What if the cure is worse? Take a look at what Donald Trump said.
They don't want to be locked into a house or an apartment or some space. It's not for our country. We're not built that way. And I said, you know, I don't want the cure to be worse than the problem itself.
Wow. He doesn't want the cure to be worse than the problem itself. I imagine we are actually almost past that point. But what did that mean? I mean, I was watching, you know, as Lawrence O'Donnell said, I don't know what it means when he says the cure could be worse than the illness himself. That is such a dangerous statement. He's going to get people killed. I remember watching him say, so in order to understand what that means, why don't we talk to an economist, which I haven't seen anyone do on the mainstream media. I wanted to discuss this with Toby Rogers, PhD and political economist. He is here to break this down for us. First of all, I don't know if you saw that breaking report. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal realization. And my hope is this afternoon that everyone gets to go back to work. Those that wanted to go to spring break get to run out of the beaches. But something tells me that mainstream media will not treat it like that. So let's put that aside for a second, Toby, because what we planned on talking about is what is Donald Trump talking about when he says the cure could be more dangerous or worse than the disease or the problem?
Yeah, so I think that his comments have been mischaracterized, and that's unfortunate. And what I've done in my research is look at, just within the last week, is just look at how changes in unemployment impact health. Okay. And there is a large literature on this. So it is very strange that both the Imperial College London model and the reports from the mainstream media overlook this important literature. So basically we have 50 years worth of data that looks at what happens when unemployment increases. And what happens is that when unemployment increases, lots of people die. We have very good data on this. So the foundational research on this was a report for the US Congress in 1976 by Harvey Brenner, who was at Johns Hopkins University. Mm-hmm. And so the study said when unemployment goes up by 1%, what happens to mortality? How many people die? And he found in 1976 that when unemployment goes up by 1%, that about 36,000 people die. Now, wow. there's a 5-year time lag in there. So it takes a while for, I mean, economies are big things and they're slow things, and it takes a while for the health effects to ripple through the system and show up in the data. But 5 years after unemployment goes up by 1%, 36,000 people are dead as a result of unemployment. And about half of those deaths are from heart attacks. But you also see other what are called deaths of despair. So increases in alcoholism, increases in suicide. You see increases in homicide. You see increased rates of incarceration. And you see more people end up in mental hospitals. These are profound health effects from increases in unemployment. Now, this research has been studied for the next 45, 50 years, and it tends to hold up. There's about 42 studies that look at this question, and they all come back and say, yes, a rise in unemployment kills lots and lots of people. And there's a recent meta-study in 2011 looked at 42 studies and said unemployment increases the mortality rate by 63%. We have very good data on this.
Wow.
So what I've done in an article that I wrote for Children's Health Defense, I tried to model the increases in unemployment and what that was going to do to fatalities, not from coronavirus, but from unemployment itself.
Okay.
And what I did is I updated the numbers from Brenner from 1976. So he was looking at population figures when the U.S. was about 200 million people. Well, the United States is now 330 million people, so our population has increased about 60% since then. And so one can estimate that today, if unemployment goes up by 1%, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 58,000 additional deaths from what are called deaths of despair.
Wow.
And we're not talking about 1% unemployment increase right now. We're talking, I mean, what the New York Times said this morning is the highest 1 week unemployment figures since they began recording these numbers in the United States. So the numbers are going to be much higher than that. So the Imperial College London model that has been driving this conversation for the last 2 weeks completely ignored deaths of despair. All they cared about was the virus. They didn't model anything we could do to try to stop the virus. It was all doom and gloom. And they never bothered to consult 50 years worth of research that shows that when unemployment goes up, lots of people die. That's the issue. And the way it's been presented in the mainstream media is maddening because it's presented as if Trump is just trying to protect the stock market. That's not the right way to think about it.
And I have to be honest, it's been really obnoxious, I have to say, to watch doctors parading out and news reporters and news anchors all telling people, you know, this is, you know, stay home, watch Netflix. Donald Trump's going to put everyone at risk. He's going to get people killed. What you should do is just do your part, and that means just stay at home, watch Netflix for the next few months while we handle this. While we, the news anchors who will not lose one single day of work, who will not be laid off, while we, the medical establishment, the doctors and the pharmacists and the people that make respiratory, you know, products, that while we increase our revenue and get more hours and get overtime in probably, you should do your part, and we're going to tell you what to do while we continue to hold our economy together and our families and put food on our families' tables. It's been really difficult because I've been thinking about this same thing. I don't have the data or the background you do, but it just seems obvious. I was a waiter for, longer than I'd like to admit as I tried to get my career rolling in my early years. And I'm telling you, I lived hand to mouth. If I missed 1 week, I was in trouble. If I missed 2 weeks, it was game over. We are desperate. I'm gathering change to buy a slice of pizza to get through the day. Do we know how many Americans are in that type of position and probably right now are in dire straits as we speak?
Yes, so we have good data on that. The U.S. Federal Reserve does a study every year. It's called the Report on the Economic Well-Being of U.S. Households. Last year, in their survey, they found that 39% of Americans would have trouble covering an unexpected expense of $400. That's because they live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have more than $400 in reserve. So 39% of Americans would have trouble covering an unexpected expense of $400. Well, this is much worse than that, right? So ABC News, Washington Post just did a poll that came out today. It said 51% of Americans have already had their work hours or their pay cut by the shutdown. And so there are profound health consequences of all of this. Goldman Sachs did a survey that came out yesterday, and they said it was a survey of 1,500 small businesses, and they found that 51% of small businesses in America will fail if the economy is locked down for 90 days. So when we see this modeling coming out of Imperial College London that somehow assumes that we can just turn off the economy for 18 months, it's bad modeling. It's bad modeling because all they've done is looked at the virus. They haven't looked at how we should respond as a society to the virus, and they haven't looked at deaths of despair and what happens when poverty goes up, when people run out of food, when people don't have money to cover their rent. Like, this is catastrophic. And when people try to have this conversation in the mainstream media, they get shouted down as
like
if
you're greedy.
all they care
You're being
about
greedy.
yeah, as if all they care about is the stock market. No, I care about the 39% of Americans who can't cover an unexpected expense of $400.
Right.
That's the crisis. And this is a traditional thing that Democrats and progressive media used to be able to talk about. And for whatever reason, now, anytime we try to have a nuanced conversation about all the factors that should go into our thinking when it comes to modeling an epidemic and all the effects of it, we get shouted down, and it's bizarre.
It is truly bizarre. I think many people that are watching right now and around this nation, the world, feel like they're living in some sort of strange alternate universe or science fiction movie. Well, you know, since we know that this is, you know, who knows how this afternoon plays out? I don't know where this evening goes. Rachel Maddow and those may be censoring the president for all I know as he tries to come forward and saying the jig is up. Who knows how this goes forward? But let's say that Donald Trump ends up saying, you know, let's just get back online today. How much are you able to, have you figured how much damage we've already done and where our unemployment levels are at? Where are we at right now if we were just to turn the economy around and get people back to work?
Yeah, so economies are big, slow things. It takes, once they shut down, it takes a while to bring things back up again. What we're seeing in unemployment claims around the country are 10 to 12-fold increases in unemployment claims already. So, so that's 10 to 12-fold increases. That's Great Depression levels of unemployment. That's a crisis that we have not seen, I think, ever in our history.
And that's already,
So,
that's where we're already at.
that's where we're already at.
Wow.
So look, we don't want to reopen too quickly, but we also don't want to wait too long. And the models and the data that have been governing the conversation thus far are terrible. And the Imperial College model, the Imperial College London model is woeful, and the data underneath it is woeful, and we need better modeling of all the effects. And any elected official who is claiming that we can go 18 months and shut the economy off and then turn it back on again, shut
Wait for a vaccine to come.
That's madness. You can't do that without tremendous loss of life as a result of increases in unemployment. That's reckless. It's both medical malpractice and political malpractice. And we need to move to better models that are more nuanced, that look at the impact of unemployment on health, and that look at the virus and look at what we can do, as you were talking about earlier in the show, around better medical treatments, around getting masks for everybody, around better testing, more testing, and tracing and figuring out how the virus is moving. But I'm just shocked by how reckless the modeling is from Imperial College London, and we must do better, and we must have a more nuanced conversation in this country about all of the factors that impact health, including unemployment.
Can I ask the million-dollar question, since we have watched top professionals, you know, early on when we were first watching Trump have to shift around on this conversation, okay, we're going to start shutting things down. They actually discussed, you know, this could go till August. It may go 18 months while we wait for a vaccine. That has been stated. What does this nation look like after 18 months of some form of lockdown while we wait for this mythical product? What would have happened to us? Is it possible to figure that?
Well, we're in uncharted territory here. There's no model for this, there's no textbook, but common sense tells us that we would never make it to 18 months. People are going to run out of money in about 2 weeks. I mean, millions of Americans will run out of money in about 2 weeks. The stimulus will maybe extend them and enable them to put food on the table and pay their rent for maybe another 2 weeks. So maybe we can make it 30 days. You go much longer than 90 days, the death toll from unemployment will just blow your mind. It will be a level of hardship that we can't comprehend. And you'll see civil unrest. You'll see people going to the grocery store and opening the doors themselves because they are out of options. The United States will not survive 18 months, excuse me. 18 months of a lockdown is just preposterous, and it's completely irresponsible to have that even be part of the conversation when half of all small businesses will close within 90 days and people will go hungry after 30 days. That's just irresponsible modeling, and we need better modeling.
Well, you know, I tried to not make it sensational today, but I have to say the way you're describing, and I can tell that you're being careful. You don't want to throw numbers out there because it would also be irresponsible, but I think we can have a sense of our own math. If 1% is a death rate of 58,000, where would we be if we hit 30%, 50%? You'd have to imagine 18 months out, what are we at? 60% of the nation is on some sort of welfare program. How does our government handle that? And what would it take to dig out? It's outrageous to me. Forget modeling and science, which is where you come from. As a reporter, as a journalist, it's outrageous to me that we had news anchors for major news agencies suggesting that somehow that was the better route, to lay off America and just push ahead because this virus is so dangerous. Honestly, as I thought, you know, if I'm president of the United States, it would have to be a lot more deadly. I mean, even more deadly than the worst flu we've ever seen to even start to catch up with the type of carnage we would see from that size of a depression in this nation. Toby, in this moment where the news is breaking all around us, to our audience out there, I know we're all appreciative. Any last thought you'd like to leave with us?
Well, the tragedy in this is that it's unnecessary. It's bad thinking based on bad data that leads to bad choices. As you've talked about on the show, there's a better path forward, right? And it's not that complicated. It's not rocket science. I mean, literally, if we could get N95 masks to everyone, doctors and nurses, yes, but also service workers, checkout clerks at Trader Joe's, delivery personnel. I mean, an N95 mask reduces transmission by 95%, right? So if you want to flatten the curve, we all want to flatten the curve. How come nobody modeled masks? Right? And improve testing, increase testing, improve tracing, better treatment options. There's all sorts of middle ground options. And what we get from the mainstream media, what we get from the white coat class is lock down the economy for 18 months, wait for a mythical future hoped for vaccine, and that's the only choice. That is not the only choice. There are lots of choices that are going to reduce the death toll and flatten the curve immediately. We should move towards those choices. Responsible elected officials must look at these interim options and not bet the future of our country on an economic model that doesn't check out, and not bet the future of our economy on a vaccine that may never arrive. There is so much that we can do right now to flatten the curve, and the Imperial College London model is bad, and the information that you're presenting gives us a range of choices to flatten the growth curve and to reduce fatalities right now. And that's the conversation that we should be having. And I'm grateful to you for being the person who brings this conversation to the American people, because this is exactly the conversation we need to be having.
Thank you so much, Toby. Thank you for your work. We'll continue to watch your work as we move into the future in this very bizarre world where somehow we're being led by people that seem to have the least amount of information, perhaps integrity. But I thank you for your integrity and your thoughts today, Toby. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Del.